Blue in Lorwyn Eclipse is about control, not force. It owns Merfolk. White might be borrowing them, but blue runs them. These decks win on tempo. You want to tap things down, untap this at the right time, draw enough cards to just stay ahead. You're not overpowering your opponents, you're making them feel slightly behind every single turn. Blue acts as a glue in its pairings with other colors. It smooths draws, fixes awkward hands, and makes splashes just work. If a deck feels clunky, blue usually makes it stop feeling that way, or at least less so. It's quiet, it's efficient, it's annoying. Card draw is everywhere, but it's small. Looting, scrying, conditional draw. The goal isn't to explode here, it's consistency, better decisions. Interaction leans on tempo and not a heavy focus on removal. Bounce, taps, freezes, buying yourself time while tribal boards are trying to snowball, you're trying to slow the pace. Blue shines best with its partners, but it doesn't need flashy rares to work. Its power is spread across commons and uncommons, which makes it reliable and frustrating. So let's break down what blue is actually doing in Lorwyn Eclipsed, card by card. First up, let's kick it off with some one drops. We have Flittering Wing Nuisance for 1 blue. We get a 2/2 Fairy Rogue with flying. This creature enters with a -1/-1 counter on it. And for 2 and a blue, we can remove a counter from this creature whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker this turn. Draw a card. Honestly, paying 1 for a 1/1 flyer, that feels great. So honestly, I feel like it's gone great. We get a 1/1 for 1 and we get some evasion there. So I'm actually pretty okay with it. The actual secondary ability, the 2 and a blue, to remove the counter that's placed on it. And whenever a creature you control does combat damage to a player or a planeswalker this turn, draw a card. Um, You can do this at instant speed because it does not tell you you can only do this at sorcery. So that is kind of a nice caveat to this. But how often are you going to use this? Probably not too often. But 1/1 for 1 as a flyer, I'm good with the rate. Then we have a reprint here. We have Spell Snare. It's an instant for 1 blue. And it says counter target spell with mana value 2. This is a reprint and it's an uncommon, but it was really good even before it was reprinted. And I have a feeling that in constructed, this card's going to be great because in constructed, 2-drop is one of the most important spell mana curve, like in the mana curve that you can have. And while it is important and limited, I don't think having, you're probably going to get one copy of this. I don't think having one of these to target 7 spells, there's too much to ask for, right? There's a chance you draw this super late or not at all, and so all their 2-drops go through anyways. And while technically that is still a possibility in constructed, it's just less likely to be that relevant here. So I think this card's going to be great in constructed, not so much in limited. Next up, we have Glamour Gifter. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/2 fairy wizard with flash and flying. And it says whenever this creature enters, choose up to one other target creature. Until end of turn, that creature has base power and toughness 4/4 and gains all creature types. I'm a huge fan of this card because I see this as a combat trick, right? And but also puts a flyer on the field, allows you to get some early damage, get 2 flyers, get 2 evasive. So the way I'm seeing this is, turn 1, you drop the Flitter Wing Nuisance that we just talked about. And technically it's a 1/1 because it's a 2/2 with a -1/-1 counter on it. But turn 2, you drop Glamour Gifter, right before damage and you give the Flitterwing Nuisance the 4/4, but technically you're swinging it with 3/3 because you have the -1/-1 counter on it. So that's what I'm seeing, and I think that that is a great way to get some early damage, and you still have some evasive on the board. You have a second flyer. I think this is a great card. I'm a huge fan of this. This is actually one of my favorite cards in blue for this set. Fantastic card. Definitely worth checking if you can play these. Um, Now it is a fairy, and the fairies really are only in blue. So you might not be able to have a bunch of work around with this. So you will kind of need blue to be your color. But if you can, fantastic card, worth working it in. I would love to see where this might land in constructed as well. I think that it could have a home. I don't know where right now, but I think it could. But fantastic card. I actually like the card. Next up, we have a Gravel Gill Scoundrel, and it's one and a blue for a 1/3 Merfolk Rogue. And it has vigilance and says whenever this creature attacks, you may tap another untapped creature you control. If you do, this creature can't be blocked this turn. Again, we've already discussed it in white, and you're going to see this throughout. The merfolks want to be tapped and untapped, so they care about being what orientation they're in. And it's super important that there are others that say untap or tap. So I think this is a pretty decent thing to do because there is the white merfolk that actually lets you tap it down to gain some life. So you can use this one, tap that down, gain some life, and then this can't be blocked. So I think this is a good way to use it. Next up, we have a Mythic and Lock Mare. It's one and a blue for a 4/5 horse serpent. This creature enters with three -1/-1 counters on it. Um, so while it's a 4/5 technically on the card, it will come in as a 1/2. But we do get some really cool abilities on here. For one and a blue, we can remove a counter from this creature and draw a card. So we get a 1/2, which isn't super off curve. I know other colors want to drop a 2 drop for 2/2, but this does give us a body to at least have on the field with some draw power. So if for some reason we're stuck on turn 3 and don't really have anything to do, we can pay the 2, remove a counter. It'll become a 2/3, and we'll be able to draw a card to help hopefully get us out of the hole. Then it also has 2 and a blue, remove 2 counters from this creature, tap target creature, and put a stun counter on it. So we do have the ability to kind of stop some damage from coming if we're playing a green deck or anything, and they're able to ramp into something a little bit bigger. We can take the 3, remove 2 of those -1/-1 counters, and at that point we have a 3/4. So I definitely think that this is a pretty cool card. I think that I'm interested to see how this is. I think in a limited format, it's pretty good. And I think it could be something that's definitely going to be able to alter some combat situations and get you out of some clunky situations given the format of limited. I love this card. I'm very excited for this card, and I think it's going to do a lot of good for us out there. And then we have Silver Gill Mentor. It's a 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Merfolk Wizard. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you'll behold a Merfolk or pay 2. Again, to behold a Merfolk, you just choose a Merfolk you control or reveal one from your hand. When this creature enters, create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk token. Honestly, I'm a huge fan of this. Especially if you're playing Merfolk and you're kind of doing the tribal thing with them, if you can show one, then you're getting 2 bodies. So you get a 2/1 and a 1/1. I think that's super great. If you have to pay the additional 2, that's not too great. Like if you want the additional cost, I could see a situation in a late game where this is your only card in hand, and you don't have any Merfolk in your hand, and maybe you don't have a Merfolk on the battlefield, in a limited format. Then I could see paying the 2 to at least have 2 bodies to at least chump something. So I could see that being a thing. I just don't think it's gonna be the option you really want to do, given that you're trying to do a tribal situation here and actually be able to get these out for free. Next up, we have Summit Sentinel. It's one and a blue for a 1/3 elemental soldier, and it says when this creature dies, draw a card. Honestly, I think this is a pretty good card, right? A 1/3 for 2. It's a pretty good blocker at this stage. A lot of creatures are 2/2s for 2. So realistically, you got a pretty decent blocker here. And then honestly, you're not going to mind trading this off on turn three with something that is able to kill it because, okay, cool, I stopped you from hitting me for three, and I got to draw a card because I let it die. So I think this is a win-win. I like the card. There's not much to say about it. It's a pretty solid common in my opinion. Then we have Unwelcome Sprite, which is one and a blue for a 2/1 fairy rogue with flying. And it says whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, surveil two. And all that means is that you can look at the top two cards of your library and you can determine if you want to put any number of those into the graveyard or at the top of your library. So you, instead of scrying them to the bottom, you scry basically to the graveyard or to the top of the library if you don't already know. Um, I think that a 2/1 flyer for two is pretty solid, honestly. And I think realistically in blue, there's, if you're in Is It and stuff, you're really going to be casting quite a few spells on your opponent's turn a lot of the time. So I think getting that ability to surveil two, it's going to allow you to filter a good amount. And I think that that could really, really work, especially because it's whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn. So if you cast one, it resolves, and then cast another one, you get to surveil two again. So if you're just not liking what you're seeing, you could just keep putting things into the graveyard and keep going through as long as you can cast another spell. Um, I think this card is pretty solid as well as an uncommon for a 2/1 flyer with that ability to surveil. I think it's good. It is important to note it does die to pretty much everything. So it doesn't really matter what they have. If they have something with flying and it's a 1/1, it's going to kill it. If they have pretty much any kill spell, it's going to kill it. If they have Spell Snare and you go to cast this, it's not ever going to hit the battlefield. But I think honestly, if the card resolves, it's a pretty solid card. Next up, we have another transform card in Sig. Wanderwine Wisdom. It's a one and a blue for a 2/2 legendary Merfolk wizard. Sig cannot be blocked. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Sig Wonderwine Wisdom, target creature gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card until end of turn. And then at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay one white. If you do, transform Sig, and then you'd be transforming him into Sig Wonderbrine Shield. And it says Sig can't be blocked. Whenever this creature transforms into Sig Wonderbrine Shield, target creature you control gains protection from each color until your next turn. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay one blue. If you do, transform Sig. Now, it's super important to pay attention to the fact that it's until your next turn. So when your next turn starts, you'll have to transform Sig into the other side if you want it to have any other effect. Now, you will keep the can't be blocked, but if you want to have the whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, planeswalker, draw a card, you will need to transform it back. So I think it loses a little bit of that kind of, amazingness. I think if you can drop this and you know, give something else that ability like at that time, I think it's really great. I'm trying to think of how it's pretty much not really gonna last around three turns, essentially, right? Because you play this, then the next turn you presumably would have to transform it with a white back over to Wonderbrand Shield, and then at the beginning of the next main phase, you'd have to then transform it back to Wonderwine Wisdom. I just don't really see that happening, to be honest. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty decent card. Again, especially if you're in Merfolk, they can't be blocked seems pretty relevant because they kind of have to force a kill spell to get rid of this thing. So I think this is a great card, even if you can only do that, especially if you're already in blue, and especially if you're partnering this up with some of the other Merfolk, especially the one that's there's a white one that gives indestructible to your other tapped creature. So you swing in with this and somebody blocks with it. Cool. It's indestructible. You're basically forcing them to use, something that gives like something like a stab, right? Which we don't really have in limited for this. So this is a great card. Then we have Aquatex defenses for 1 and a blue. We have an enchantment aura with flash, and it says enchant creature you control. When this aura enters, enchanted creature gains hexproof until end of turn. Enchanted creature gets +1/+2. Since it gets that hexproof, it can't target spells or abilities your opponent controls. So if they try to use a kill spell or anything, the important word here is flash. So if you're in the middle of attacking, you've declared your attackers, opponent responds with some sort of kill spell or giving it -2/-2 or something to kill it, you flash this in and attach it to it. Well, your creature gets +1/+2, and because this will resolve before their kill spell, it has hexproof. So it basically fizzles. That spell actually will not be able to resolve. So I think this is a pretty solid combat trick for blue, and giving yourself hexproof and maybe even catching a little bit of extra damage. Um, I don't know how much I would value this overall unless realistically I just need to fill in a slot and be able to get this, because it is also important that this can be a combat trick to get rid of something. Maybe they block with something. You have a 3/3 and you're swinging into a 4/4, and they're just like, oh, this is an easy block. Blue doesn't really have much to deal with this. And you flash this in and you get rid of it. And the nice thing is that they lose their creature, but you don't. So this is a fantastic card in that manner. But I don't know how valuable that's really going to be for that like one off, right? And it is a card that you're replacing a 2-drop, where 2-drop is a pretty important slot, especially in limited, and a 2-drop that's not going to be useful most of the time unless you're just wanting to get in an extra point of damage. I, you know, if you think about it, how much more likely would you be to play this over another 2-drop that's a 2/2 creature that's going to get 2 damage as opposed to the one additional? Whereas if you add this one additional to a creature and then it gets blocked, even if it's just a chump, you got none of it through. Whereas if they have one creature and you have two and you swing in, you're at least getting 2 damage in. So I think that there's some pros and cons here, and it definitely needs to be weighed, but I don't think it's going to be that amazing unless you just really need the card, and you don't have any other playables. We also have a Blossom Bind. It's 1 and a blue, and it's also an enchantment aura. It says enchant creature. When this aura enters, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature can't become untapped and can't have counters put on it. I think this is super useful for black, against black, because black has the blight stuff. And you're basically saying, hey, you can't put blight counters on this, and you can't untap it. So it's pretty much just gonna stay tapped all the time. So it is kind of a removal. And so it's forcing them to have an enchantment destruction in order to get this off the field. So it's pretty okay. I think it's a pretty good removal spell for blue to run. And I would definitely run Blossom Bind over the Aquatex defenses for sure. Next up, we have Noggle the Mind for 1 and a blue. Again, we have another enchantment aura with flash. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a colorless Noggle with base power and toughness 1/1. I think this is definitely still a pretty decent um, card. I think I'd still rather have the Blossom Bind. Being able to just basically remove something entirely is much better than having something become a 1/1 where it can still get counters put on it. Um, y- yeah, I mean, realistically, it is good because if somebody does play like a monster creature that's a 7/7, like some of the like white has and stuff, and you flash this in and you give it base power and toughness 1/1, and it doesn't have any counters, that's a cool thing. Now, this is also a very cool thing because if somebody plays a one that has blight, like a blight -2/-2, or even a -1/-1, it's really cool because if those -1/-1 counters are still on the creature and you give it base power and toughness 1/1, you've killed the creature because you give it a power and toughness of 1/1, and then the counters are applied. And since its toughness is 0 or less, that creature is gone. So I think that that's super important here. So the card is pretty decent. Again, it's a decent removal spell in some instances, and it can definitely, because it has that flash keyword ability, I think it makes it a little bit better, especially if no counters are involved, because you swing in, again, they block, and you flash this in, cause their creature to be a 1/1, and you swung it with a 4/4 or something. So I think it's a pretty decent card. We then have Rime Fire Torque. It's one and a blue for an artifact. It is a rare, and it says as this artifact enters, choose a creature type. Whenever a permanent you control of the chosen type enters, put a charge counter on this artifact. And you can tap it to remove 3 charge counters from this artifact. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. I think this is just really a great card to play if you have, um, you know, a lot of Merfolk or anything like that, because you can play this name Merfolk. And when you play them, you're gonna be able to put those charge counters on here, and being able to, you know, copy spells has proven to be quite powerful, especially if you have removal spell like instants and sorceries. Super powerful. Getting a basically a 2 for 1 that can be repeated. So if you treat this as one of the spells in your, 27 or 23 spells in your limited deck, and you have 7 or 8 kill spells for some reason because that's just how the luck of the draw came out for you, being able to copy each of those if this comes down early, especially if you drop this on turn 2. Now we got an instant and run away together for 1 and a blue. And it says choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owners' hands. I am pretty certain this is not going to be that great unless you have an ETB trigger that you just really want to go off again. Um, that's just it because it's cool that you get to send some big guy back to their hand, but chances are you're not really going to have something super amazing that you want to do. I think this card will be pretty good in a commander, for instance, where you have 3 other players or whatever at the table and you want to target 2 of their creatures. I think this could be better there, but I don't think you're really going to want to do this in limited. Definitely in constructed, I could see instances where you want to do this for sure. And then we have Wild Unraveling. It is blue, blue for an instant, and it says as an additional cost to cast this spell, blight 2 or pay 1. Again, to blight, you put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. It's important to note here that it has to be the same creature. You can't do -1 on one creature and -1 on another creature. And it's counter target spell. I think this is pretty good, honestly. For a 2-drop counter target spell. Again, this is something we're seeing with a few of these other ones. The limit here is that it's either 3 counter target spell, which we've seen before in other, counter spell, um, or it's blight 2, and maybe you want something to die, or you're playing white as well, and you have Reese that can remove those counters for you. Um, I think that this is a fantastic card. Honestly, I think this is a counterspell I just pretty much would play because it's counter target spell. There is no limit to it. Now we got Glamour Might for 2 and a blue. We get a 2/2 Fairy Rogue with flash and flying. When this creature enters, choose one. You can tap target creature or untap target creature. I think this is, again, this is great, right? Um, there's a few fairies we've already talked about, and if you're tagging these into some merfolk in a limited environment that want to be tapped or untapped, you can use those. But this is really great with that flash. You can tap something down right when you're about to attack, so it can't even block. Um, Again, being able to use this as a combat trick, that it's just so versatile. And I personally don't mind paying 3 for this, especially as a blue player where you're kind of wanting to leave some mana open in a lot of instances. See, I could see a lot of instances where you're going into a turn and you have 3 open mana because you're wanting to give off that you might have a counter spell or something, and you flash this in, and then you're getting to swing with it the next turn after tapping something down that they thought they were holding a creature back to block. So I think that this is a great card. I think that this is very viable. It's not the most amazing card, but I think it's pretty decent. We have a Alendra Guardian for 2 and a blue. We get a 3/4 fairy wizard with flash flying. Seem to just have that on all the fairy wizards or the fairies this go around. This creature enters with a -1/-1 counter on it, so it is a 2/3 to start. You can pay 1 and a blue to remove a counter from this creature. Counter target non-creature spell. Its controller draws a card. Um, I think this is pretty solid, honestly. Again, um, you can do this in the same turn, right? So like you can flash this in and then they're wanting to, cast something after this is resolved. You can pay the 1 and a blue if you have it open and you can counterspell that just happened. Not tons of situations where that might be relevant, but it is something you can do. And I think it is worth keeping in mind that this is an efficient creature. If you follow keto, for instance, the E for efficiency, definitely, I think this is an efficient creature, right? For 3, you're getting a 3/4 flash flying, um, that technically is a 2/3, but I'm okay with that, honestly, because we can remove it for 2 the next turn. Not a big problem. I think this is a very solid card. I think that this is worth playing if you have the support around it and blue is an open color. I think this is worth it. If Kolrath Mystic for 2 and a blue, we get a 2/4 elemental wizard and it says whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, this creature gets +2/+0 and gains vigilance until end of turn. Um, while this is relevant because these games tend to go a little bit longer, you don't play tons and tons of cards that are mana value 4 or greater. So you're not going to use this tons and tons. However, if you do get to get this off a couple of times, you do get that vigilance. So it is nice because you'll be swinging it with a 4/4 with vigilance. But it is important to note that that +2 will go away at the end of your turn. So you're sitting back with a 2/4. So that is something to keep in mind. We then have Rhinekin Recluse. It's 2 and a blue for a 3/2 elemental wizard. When this creature enters, return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. I think this is pretty solid. Being able to play this and bounce a creature for them back to their hand can, again, do what blue wants to do. You're wanting to disrupt them and add up these small incremental, drawing cards, disrupting how their mana is flowing, especially if they're an aggressive deck and they're wanting to just play out, play out, play out, play out and then you're on the draw and you play your turn 3 and you just bounce their turn 3 back to their hand. Well, cool. You just messed up their whole plan. I think that this is a pretty solid card. Honestly, one of my favorite uncommons in blue. We have Silver Gill Peddler for 2 and a blue. We get a 2/3 Merfolk Citizen. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Again, another Merfolk cares about being tapped down, gets to draw a card, gets to discard a card with that. So definitely getting to do some looting here. Definitely getting to siphon through and see more cards and get the cards you're actually needing so that you can win. This fits exactly into if you have Merfolk and you have this is what you want to do. And now we got my boy Oko, Lorwyn Liege over here for 2 and a blue. You get a legendary planeswalker. Oko. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay a 1 green. If you do, transform Oko. You get a +2, which is up to 1 target creature gains all creature types. This effect doesn't end, so super important. Even if you get rid of Oko, this does not end until that creature is gone. And then you get a +1. Target creature gets -2/-0 until your next turn. So a nice little way to stop something from being able to kill one of your creatures. Pretty decent. And then if you did pay that green, you get the other side, which is Oko Shadowmoor Scion. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay 1 blue. If you do, transform Oko. For -1, you get to mill 3 cards. You may put a permanent card from among them into your hand. And for -3, create 2 3/3 green elk creature tokens. And at -6, choose a creature type. You get an emblem with creatures you control of the chosen type, get +3/+3, and have vigilance and hexproof. So super important. From the front side, his +2, give a creature a type. It does not end. So even if Oko goes away after you get this emblem and you've ulted him, you've lost the 6, and you've kind of put yourself in that position, does not matter. You'll get that emblem, and that creature does not lose that creature type from the front. It's also nice because a -3 that gives you two 3/3 green elk creature tokens. Those are pretty decent bodies for you to literally play this down, plus to it, give something whatever, and then flip it -3 if you need some blockers off the bat. It's a super solid way to do this. I think it's great. I am a little bit bigger of a fan of the Johnny, but Oko's great, and I'm sure someone's gonna find a way to break Oko. Thirst for Identity for 2 and a blue. It's an instant. Draw 3 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. I can think of plenty of situations where, as blue, you would willingly give up the creature card. I think this is a pretty decent spell here, especially considering that this is what you want to do as blue. Typically, you want to filter through, find the cards you're looking for. Now, it is a little more limiting because it has to be a creature card, and maybe you're looking for a creature card. But at that same time, if you're looking for the creature card, you're willing to discard the other 2 cards, take your creature card. So I think that this is definitely a pretty solid draw card and definitely worth playing if you're needing to be able to filter and find your things. Now we get Blue's Champion. When Champions of the Shoal, for 3 and a blue, we get a 4/6 Merfolk Soldier. As an additional cost to cast a spell, behold a Merfolk and exile it. Again, you need to take a Merfolk that you control or a card from your hand and exile that card. Whenever this creature enters or becomes tapped, tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. This is super important because it says 1 target creature, which means it can be your opponent's creatures. You do get to tap 1 and then put a stun counter on it. Super important that if this stays around and you start tapping it multiple times, you can continue to stun the same creature. If it's already tapped, it just won't tap again, but it will put the stun counter on it. When this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. Again, this is the exiled card that you just exiled so that you could play this. You're going to return it to your hand. If it was exiled from your hand, it's just going to go back to your hand. If it was one that you already controlled, obviously it's not going to go back to the battlefield. It will go back to your hand, but you don't lose that card. So this is a pretty solid, there's no loss here. You get a pretty solid body for a 4-drop. Um, then we have Pestered Wellguard, a 3 and a blue, get a 3/2 Merfolk Soldier. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying. Again, we get another flying creature. Here, this is a pretty solid, right? Even if you just need the 1/1 for a chumper, or just to peck away a little bit of damage every turn. For 4-drop, getting a 3/2 and a 1/1 with flying is a pretty solid rate because you're getting a 3/2 Merfolk, and you're probably already playing Merfolk if you're in blue, and you're getting a fairy, which you're probably also playing fairies because there's already a couple other fairies here if you just really lingered here. So you do have some ability to kind of work around. Um, while this card's not amazing, it's an okay 4-drop. I'd obviously rather have Champions of the Shoal, but if you have a Pestered Well Guard and you don't have a decent 4-drop, this isn't a 4-drop that I would be like, oh my God, I absolutely will not play this. But it's not like I wouldn't be the most excited to play it either, if that makes sense. Next up, we have Tanufel Rhyme Speaker for 3 and a blue. We get a 2/4 Elemental Wizard, and it says whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, draw a card. Again, most of your cards are not going to be mana value 4 or greater, so this is a very limited. Realistically, you probably only have 4 or 5 of those spells in your deck, and this is one of them. So it's not the best, but it is playable, right? You do have creatures that can, actually make this trigger. So it is a pretty nice card potentially. It definitely would need to look at your other 4-drops and see if there's a better one. We then are another 4-drop here. We have Wonder Wine Distractor for 3 and a blue. We get a 4/3 Merfolk Wizard. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-0 until the end of turn. Like, I'm personally more excited about this because we have a 4/3
with the ability to shrink something on the other side that we're swinging into. I'm a little more excited about this because it doesn't rely on me doing another thing to get it from external from the card, right? So I'm a little more excited about it. While I do think Tanafel Rhyme Speaker has its place, I'm a little more interested in the Wonderwine Distractor, especially because it's a Merfolk as well. I'm a little more interested in that for sure.
Now we have Glenn Elindra's answer, 2 and a blue for a mythic instant. It says this spell can't be countered. Counter all spells your opponents control and all abilities your opponents control. Create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying for each spell and ability countered this way. Um, you know, I'm super fascinated by this card because it is an instant, and I feel like the only way that I really see this being just overly incredible is you have a stack going or there's a bunch of triggered abilities in a stack, right? I think that that's really what you're looking for here is just there to be a stack going. They've got a bunch of triggers all set, and then you're just casting this before the triggers go off, and each one of those you're getting a 1/1. So I think that this is a phenomenal card because triggers go off like crazy. I think this definitely in Constructed will be much better because triggers are much more reliable there. And in a limited format, in a sealed format, I don't know how well you're always going to be able to predict what the triggers will look like on the stack. But definitely, if you see one coming with a card that gets played, and you're like, oh no, this is going to be a problem for me. And there's a couple other triggers that are happening. This is great because you're gonna, stop three things from happening and get 3/1/1 blue and black fairy creature tokens with flying. I think that this is a great card. Honestly, I'm excited about it. Then we have Swat Away. It's 2 and a blue. This is kind of a quasi pseudo removal spell. This spell costs 2 less to cast if a creature is attacking you, and the owner of target spell or creature puts it on their choice of top or bottom of their library. So, super important that this can technically target a spell on the stack because it is a spell that is on the like in the playfield that they can, or not on the playfield, but is available for you to target with this. But it also can target a creature that's attacking you, like it says. Um, if it's a big enough threat, right, and you're trying to draw into something, or maybe you have lethal, or maybe, you're trying to just save yourself, this is a pretty cool card. But the fact that they get to choose to put it on top of their library, and they're just going to draw into it, can put yourself in a position where maybe you can draw into a win con because it at least buys you 2 turns, right? Because um, they're basically going to have to go through their next turn to get there. I would prefer this if it was shuffled into your library for sure, but I do think that the pay 2 less if the creature's attacking you does make this a little more appealing because I see a lot of instances, especially in limited, where there's some big creature swinging at you and you just really want it to go away. Because maybe you have a win con in your hand or there's still one in your deck and you just want a chance to be able to draw it. So I think that this is a pretty decent card here for sure. I am a bigger fan of the Glen Elandra's answer than I am the Swat Away, but I do see a lot of value in Swat Away. And, as blue, you don't get tons and tons of removal a lot. So having a pseudo quasi like removal spell as blue um, definitely feels kind of good. Now we have Temporal Cleansing for 3 and a blue. It's a sorcery and it has Convoke. Your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 generic mana or 1 mana of that creature's color. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library second from the top or on the bottom. So very similar to Swat Away here, um, except Swat Away feels a lot better. I think having the instant matters here. Obviously, being able to convoke this is kind of cool. Um, but as blue, you really like, for the most part, to be able to hold up some mana, do things on their turn, threaten that you got something to do. And I feel like doing it as a sorcery kind of just basically you play this on your turn, and then you pass to them, and then they play some other threat or whatever that you can't interact with. So this feels a little not the best to me, but it's still a decent way to deal with a big threat, right? So it is an option that you have as blue. I definitely would prefer the swat away. I think the swat away is a little bit more useful in a lot of scenarios. Now, with a swat away, it is super important to note as well that it does cost two blue. So there is some trade-off as far as value that you need there. Next up, we have Disruptor of Currents for 3 and a blue blue, and we get a 3/3 Merfolk Wizard with Flash and Convoke. When this creature enters, return up to one other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. I'm excited about this more than I am the previous temporal cleansing because I have the flash. I have the ability to interact with something, get a body, and it's for 1 mana. So for 1 additional mana with the convoke still, I can flash this in, have a 3/3 body, and return this thing to your owner's hand when, yes, it's not as good as being able to be the second from the top of the library, right? Where it's like, okay, cool, 2 turns, but I get a body with this. I get the ability to do something with it the next turn. So I've affected your board state. And to me, affecting the board state twofold is way more important than affecting it onefold, right? Where you're getting rid of just one of their things. I'm getting rid of one of your things and adding something of my own. So I'm super excited about this card. It's one of my favorite blue cards in this set for sure. Then we have Illusion Spinners for 4 and a blue. We get a 4/3 Fairy Wizard. You may cast this spell as though it had flash if you control a fairy. It's flying. This creature has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Um, this is a pretty okay card. It's nothing that I'm super excited about. Fairies aren't overwhelmingly in the set. There are quite a few if you're playing blue that you could use to be able to get this ability. And again, having hexproof as long as it's untapped is something that is a little bit, dubious kind of because it has flying. You kind of want to tap this thing. So they're just gonna, at the moment you go to attack, they're just gonna use whatever they were gonna use anyways. So that is something to keep in mind. Next up, we have the Omni Changeling. It's 3 blue blue for a 0/0 shapeshifter with Changeling and Convoke. And you may have this creature enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield except it has Changeling. So this is super important. You're in blue. You probably want it to be a Merfolk. And since it has Changeling, it is a Merfolk. So you can make a copy of whatever bomb they just dropped on the field and you get Merfolk, and you get all the benefits of all the Merfolk stuff that you have going on. So I think this is a pretty solid card. The biggest problem here is that it does rely on having to have something be there for you to copy. Now, it doesn't matter if that copy goes away later, but it does hurt this card a little bit that it has to be around in the first place for you to use it. Then we have Stratosaur for 4 and a blue. We get a 3/5 elemental with flying. When this creature enters, target creature gains flying until end of turn. And it also has basic land cycling for 1 and a blue. And for the 1 and blue, you discard this card, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Super important that this is some mana fixing. So I am a little more excited about this than I am the Omni Changeling because this allows another creature on your board to get flying. If maybe you have a 4/4 or a 3/3 that you want to get flying, let it get over the top, get some damage. But it also, if you need a little bit of fixing, you drew this in your opening hand and your lands feel a little bit stalled out. You can pay the 2, discard this, go get you a basic land card, especially if you're needing it fixed. So I'm a little more excited about this than I am the Omni Changeling. Lofty Dreams 3 blue blue for an enchantment aura with Convoke. Enchant creature. When this aura enters, draw a card. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has flying. Now it's kind of cool because you can drop this on a bomb, get +2/+2, has flying even if it doesn't normally, and you get to draw a card off of it. The problem is again, cards that require something else for them to just be good in a limited format feel a little bit bad because you can get it and you don't necessarily need it. let's say you don't have anything on the board to actually enchant this with. Well, you don't really have anything to target this with, so you can't really draw the card. It makes this a little bit rough. Now, at this point in the game, you should have something to target. It's unlikely, but feels bad, man, if not. Then we have Unexpected Assistance. It's 3 blue, has Convoke. It's an instant, and it says draw 3 cards, then discard a card. The only thing saving this card is the Convoke. Again, we've talked about other draw spells we already have. The Convoke kind of saves us here because we're pretty much never going to pay 5 for this. We're probably always going to pay 2 or 3 for this to make this kind of worth it because that's kind of the normal rate, right? 3 for draw 3, discard a card. So it's kind of the normal rate. That's kind of where we want it to be. We have Harmonized Crescendo for 4 blue. We get an instant with Convoke, and it says choose a creature type, draw a card for each permanent you control of that type. I think that this is probably the best draw spell we have, specifically because we have the Convoke and we get to choose the creature type. So with the Kindred, right, we have the enchantments that count as Merfolk. So you've or count as whatever, creature type they are. So you have one of those enchantments down and you have a plethora of creatures within those. You're drawing a card for each of those, including those kindred enchantments. This is a fantastic card. And then we have Mirror Form for 4 blue instant. This is a mythic. Each non-land permanent you control becomes a copy of target non-aura permanent. Super crazy because if you have enchantments down or anything like that that obviously aren't auras, then it could become whatever creature you have on the battlefield, whatever creature somebody else has on the battlefield. It just becomes a copy of something else, right? That just isn't a land. This is super huge. This is a really great way to just turn some extra cards that you have around, into just some big monster out of nowhere and swing since it's an instant. You could do this in the middle of, combat, like declaring attackers, and they're like, "Oh, you're just swinging with a bunch of 1/1s." Huh, instant copy. Super valid. This is just disgusting, and I'm looking forward to hopefully I open this and I win a game, getting to slam this down because they're like, "Oh, you, this is so cute. You're just attacking with little 1/1s." Nope. Here come the 6/6s. Next up, we have Shine Striker for 4 blue. We get a 3/3 elemental with flying, with Vivid. When this creature enters, draw cards equal to the number of colors among permanents you control. Now, in a limited format, I'm going to go ahead and tell you this is probably not the greatest because you're probably only going to draw 2 cards. Because in a limited format, you're really restricted to 2 colors because there's not tons of fixing necessarily. So you're probably only going to draw 2 cards from this. And it's really going to be a feels bad man if you only can draw one because for whatever reason, you don't have any, you just have 1 color amongst permanents you control. So that is something to keep in mind. That's unlikely, but usually you're going to drop this for 6, 3/3, and you're going to draw 2 cards. Wonder Wine Farewell, 5 blue. You get a kindred sorcery with Merfolk. The kindred means that it counts as a Merfolk for anything that says for how many Merfolk you have or anything like that. It counts as one. It has Convoke and return 1 or 2 target non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Then, if you control a Merfolk, create a 1/1 white and blue Merfolk creature token for each permanent returned to its owner's hand this way. This is pretty solid. Limited games do run long. Chances are probably not that long. You probably are already playing Merfolk if you're in this color. So being able to return 1 or 2 permanents and create 1 or 2 1/1s, kind of cool. Um, but it's not really a bomb. It's not something that's gonna like overwhelm your opponent. But the idea here is that if you've been playing blue, you're playing Merfolk, and you've been playing it the right way, you've been accumulating these minor advantages throughout the game. That by the time you do this, their board state's already pretty disrupted because you've been sending things back to their library, you've been sending things back to their hand, and things like that. So by the time you get to this, you're basically
going, oh, you don't have anything on the board. I've not allowed you to really play Magic. And we all know that that's the most fun you can have in Magic is when you don't allow your opponent to play Magic. Um, then we have Rhyme Chill, which is 6 and a blue. It's an instant with Vivid. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each color among permanents you control. Again, most likely 2. Tap up to 2 target creatures, put a stun counter on each of them, and then draw a card. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, not the best. I probably, under almost no circumstances, want to play this pretty much ever. Now we have probably my favorite blue card. We have Sunderflock. It's 7 blue. You get a 5/5 elemental. And this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest mana value among elementals you control. So if you have a 4-drop elemental, well, congratulations. This now is a 3 generic and blue. So you have a 5/5 for 5 with flying, and it's when this creature enters, if you cast it, return all non-elemental creatures to their owner's hands. Chances are you just board wiped your opponent, and unless they have a changeling or an elemental on the board, congratulations, you have a board wipe. You probably have a few elementals, and even if you sent a couple of things back to your hand, you probably have a few because you just reduced the cost with one. So, congratulations. This is a bomb. You've probably just won the game. Congratulations. GG's. Shake their hand. You know, go ahead and move on.
Again, here are some of the cards in blue that I'm really just keeping an eye out, that I think are super strong and I think are worth really heavily biasing towards blue. If you can get even a couple of these, I think it can really help. First, there's Glen Elendra, Guardian, the 3-drop flash flying fairy wizard, with some fantastic abilities there. The ability to have a 2/3 that can be a 3/4, and the ability to remove that counter in order to counter some spells and stuff. Non-creature spells to specify, but and then they can draw a card, sure, but I just stopped you from doing whatever thing, especially if you know it's a bomb or whatever. This is something great. Now, it is important to point out that in limited, you're probably really only targeting 7 or 8 of their spells, but hey, 7 or 8 spells out of the 23 that are playable potentially, we're fine with that, you know? Lockmare, the 2-drop 4/5 Horse Serpent. It's going to come in with those 3 -1/1 counters. But we do get a couple of abilities here to remove those counters to either draw a card or tap a creature and put a stun counter on it. So a little bit of versatility there. Really like that card. The Harmonized Crescendo, again, we just talked about this one. It's the 6-drop Convoke. We're going to be able to choose a creature type and then draw a card for each of those creatures that we have of the chosen type, right? Or each permanent you control the type. It's important to note that again, kindred enchantments count here. Glen Elendra's Answer, it's the 4-drop instant that can't be countered. And again, if there's a stat going on, you play this, counter all spells and abilities your opponents control, create a 1/1 blue and black fairy token for each of the spell and abilities countered this way. So if there's a full stack of those abilities, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, you're going to create that many 1/1 fairy creature tokens with flying, and you're going to be having a good time if you can counter all those things and then have those 1/1s. Then we have Oko. Obviously, Oko's probably going to be a problem here. He's the 3-drop planeswalker, and he can transform here at the beginning of each first main phase. Again, super great. On the front side, you're going to get to name a creature type for a creature to gain it. And then on the back side, you can get the emblem creatures you control of the chosen type, get +3/+3, and have vigilance and hexproof. So this is really great with how we're running all these kindreds and things. Having a bunch of merfolk or having a bunch of elementals or fairies or whatever it is, you can choose those. Give a creature that doesn't have this ability, and then when you get that ultimate, you're able to actually have +3/+3 vigilant and hexproof on all your creatures. And it's super important. Changeling again has all creature types, So doesn't matter the creature type. If you have a changeling out, it is that type. It'll get them. Then there's Sunderflock. I think Sunderflock is absolutely the big bomb. If you pull this, you probably should be playing blue and making sure you can cast this if you get it. It is a 9-drop. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest mana value among elementals you control. You're going to get a 5/5 flying when this creature enters. If you cast it, return all non-elemental creatures to their owner's hand. Again, you're probably going to want to drop in a couple of elementals to hopefully have it on the board so that when you drop this, you can get a little bit of a cost reduction. Even 3 or 4 here is going to be crazy because you're getting a 5/5 flyer with essentially a board wipe back to everyone's hands because you're probably the only one with elementals on the field. Then they're gonna get, it's just not gonna be a good time for them. Again, GG's, shake your hands, move on. And then there's the Sig Wanderwine Wisdom, 2-drop, can't be blocked on either side. And you get different abilities depending on what sides face up. If the front is face up, this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you're going to get to draw a card. And then at the beginning of a first main phase, you could pay the cost there, 1 white or 1 blue, depending on which side is face up. Again, can't be blocked on both sides. But if it's Wanderbrine Shield, then target creature you control is going to gain protection from each color until your next turn. So super, super important here. These are the cards that I would keep an eye out. These are the ones I'm excited to play with if I can pull them in my pools this weekend. Again, blue and Lorwyn Eclipsed, it's not about the big moments. It's about controlling all the small things and just building up advantage little by little throughout the game. Merfolk definitely drive the color, but you still have fairies and elementals here. But the real strength is, again, tempo tapping, bouncing, and sequencing turns, your opponent is always reacting and never really able to establish any sort of board state. Card draw exists, but it is measured. It does have some hurdles you have to jump through, but it does exist. Looting, you know, surveilling, then selecting keeps games clean and decisioning is meaningful for you. But blue is rewarding plans and just punishes lazy play. So you got to stay alert, stay focused if you're wanting to push through with these cards. And as a support color, blue does the real work. It smooths draws, can fix awkward curves, and it can make tribal and splashy decks function. If a deck feels consistent, blue is probably the reason why if you're playing it. Interaction, it's about buying time, not answering just everything forever, right? Make sure you're selective on what you're trying to target. Make sure that you're not just sending some tutu back because it's annoying you at that moment. Use your life as a resource. Um, that matters in a format where boards snowball and threats can stack up fast, right? So you don't want to use some removal that you do have when you don't have a lot of them on a 2/2 just because you're sitting at 20 life and you like the rounded 20 there. Go to 18, just save that removal. They're gonna play something bigger you're gonna want to get rid of. And to be honest, Blue doesn't really rely on these flashy rares to succeed. A lot of the commons and uncommons carry a lot of load here, making them dependable and just pretty hard to play against as long as you're playing it correctly and you're calculating and actually making the right plays. If you like tempo, decision heavy games and winning, right, just trying to stay ahead, this is exactly where you want to be in Lorwyn Eclipsed. Um, Good luck.